Imagine being stuck between two huge obstacles. On one side, a cruel army charging at you, and on the other, a wall of water that looks like it can't be crossed. This isn't a figure of speech. That's exactly what happened to a whole group of people. Before, the desert was quiet. Now, it was filled with the sound of rushing feet and racing hearts. The ground shook. It looked like the sky was watching in silence, and Moses was in the middle of all this trouble. It can be hard to keep going when the enemy is close behind. What should you do? What do you do when there seems to be no way out and hopelessness is threatening to swallow you whole? Faith that can see past the present situation is the way. Moses didn't look at the horses or the sea. He looked up. Miracles had happened along the way to that point. Egypt was hit by plagues, which set free people who had been slaves for generations. But when they turned to face the Red Sea, the crowd shook. Young children clung to their mums. Older people were shaking with fear, and fighters without weapons stared at the people who were about to die. Either it was the right place to fail or shine. The chosen leader, Moses, didn't scream, run away, or give up when things got scary. His eyes were fixed on the sky. They were looking for more than just a plan. They were looking for direction from the God who had promised to lead them to freedom. He didn't have an army. He didn't have any ships. They were tired. He only had a simple stick in his hands, and he was sure of himself. The dust that Pharaoh's chariots kicked up mixed with the wind that was getting stronger. There was no change in the direction of the water, but the mood was different. Something that couldn't be seen was being turned on. In the middle of the storm, Moses' quiet faith was like a light. He was aware that God was about to reveal who really controlled events. The boss then held out his staff. It wasn't magic what they did. It was a duty to do so, of giving up everything to follow God's will. This caused the impossible to start to happen. Before, the sea had only been a barrier, but now it started to open up as if it were listening to God. No longer was the wind just wind, it was God's breath making the way clear. The crowd, which had been screaming in fear before, stood still and watched as a path opened between the water. The waves rose up like walls, and between them dry land showed up. The sea that had stood for death was now a way to get to heaven. It was a miracle at every turn. Every breath she took was a win over fear, and the Egyptians followed behind, sure of their strength. But what the Israelites used as a road would turn into a trap for those who were after them. The cart's wheels started to get stuck. The fear swung around. Now it was the men of Pharaoh who ran, trying to figure out what was going on. It was too late, though. Moses raised his stick once more. The sea closed with the same respect with which it had opened. When the seas went back to where they were, they sank those who were brave enough to go against God's plan. The desert became quiet again. It wasn't the same fearful silence, though. It was a respectful silence of fear. When someone realized that something divine had just taken place. Things didn't just happen by magic that day. That's what it said. God doesn't just set his children free, he also fights for them. He makes impossible things possible. He plays the sea like an instrument, the wind like a friend, and a staff like a weapon of victory. People who had been slaves were now free, not just physically but also mentally. Going across the sea wasn't just a way to get away. It was a baptism for everyone, a turning point, a point from which you can't go back. Egypt was no longer just a shadow in the rearview mirror after that. It was a past that the water had buried. Moses, who had paused in front of the burning bush, now stood in front of a people who had changed. Not because of the power of his words, but because God's power showed itself. Rather than giving lectures he didn't need to, the sea told him what to say. When the Israelites turned around and saw that their enemies were gone, they knew that something had changed for good. It wasn't just a trip through space, it was a journey inside, a break from fear, slavery, and the past. That night in the desert will always be remembered. The story would be told over and over again. That event would be used by prophets, psalmists, and preachers as live proof that God is trustworthy. that he hears, that he does something, even when it looks like everything is lost. Because sometimes the most amazing things happen when you hear horses coming and water blocking your way. And a simple act of faith is enough to make the sky move and the sea follow. Before we go on with this moving story, we'd like to invite you to along for the ride. If this message moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell so you don't miss any more powerful Bible stories. Say something like, "The sea opened up for me too," and then tell us about a time when God did something impossible in your life. Let's work together to make a place of faith and testimony. Also, please leave a super thank you if you want to help this job. We can keep telling more Bible stories and spreading this message of faith and hope thanks to your gift. Thank you so much for your help. We'll keep going on our journey today. As Moses' motion ended, tension was still high in the air. Even though the moving water affected the people, the fear still stopped them in their tracks. In the middle of the day, the sound of the Egyptian army was like thunder. It was clear that something amazing was about to happen because the dust from the carts mixed with the wind from the sea. Now the Israelites' eyes were on the sea, and now they were on the soldiers coming at them quickly and cruelly. When moms held their kids close to their chest, their hearts got tight. With shaky steps, the elders looked around for an answer. Even though the young people were strong, they didn't seem to notice the end of the world scene that was happening. That didn't stop Moses, though. His eyes stayed on her. It wasn't on the threats or the water, but on the promise. He seemed to see the way where no one else did. He didn't cry or run away when he felt hopeless. Instead, he responded with pure, strong faith. He knew he wasn't by himself. "Today, the Lord will fight for you," he had just said, and those words kept going through their hearts. They weren't just words of comfort, they were a message from God. It wouldn't just be a vacation, it would be the setting for a wind that God himself wrote. The wind got stronger. The waves, which were rough at first, started to separate as if they were following a master plan. The sea, which usually swallows up people and ships, now showed a dry, hard road that seemed to have been made by hands that couldn't be seen. The miracle was going on right in front of everyone. It wasn't a story. It wasn't a dream. It was true. The Israelites' feet touched the ground, which had been covered by the water. There was a passageway between liquid walls in front of them. All they had to do was take a confident step. Moses showed the start of the crossing with a calm hand movement. There was no question left. It was time to move on. People got up and started to walk, at first slowly and hesitantly, as if trying to see what was possible. Then moving faster because they felt like they needed to get there quickly, and their faith was starting to grow amidst their fear. Every step on that road was a response to requests from many generations. Every mark on the wet sandy beach was proof that the Eternal One had the power to make the impossible possible. The king, whose pride had been hurt and whose heart had become hard, watched everything from afar. His face showed that he was both shocked and angry. How could those slaves be so bold as to question his authority? How were they so brave to break away from his rule? He told his troops to follow the same road without giving it much thought. It was time for the Egyptian chariots to move forward through the water walls. The sea had just been covering the ground before their wheels went through it. The troops were used to winning battles and didn't realize they were entering holy ground, where the result had already been decided by divine justice. The Israelites moved forward on the other side. The only sounds that broke the quiet were rush steps and water lapping against the sides of the path. It was a sad time. No one yelled, no one ran. There was respect in that move. People knew that what they were going through would have an impact on not only their lives, but also the lives of future generations. After the last Israelite had crossed, Moses stopped. He looked over at the passageway between the water, where angry Egyptians were now moving forward. That's where the God of Israel did something else. The cart's wheels started to get stuck. The ground became less solid after being hard for a while. The men became scared. The horses whinnied because they were lost. The order to move forward became unclear. There was an unseen power at work in that place that made the most powerful army in the world lose faith. Moses then made a new sign, and the sea listened. After holding back for a moment, the water came back with a vengeance. The liquid walls broke apart and swallowed the whole army with a loud roar. The Pharaoh, who used to be a complete master, saw his troops and his power go away. People on the other side saw it all happen. It was tough to believe what they had been through. They had gone from hopelessness to freedom, from slavery to freedom, and from certain death to a full life. With swords, they lost. The humans didn't help them get away. A God who can do what no one else can do saved them. There was a respectful silence now. Everyone there knew what they had seen wasn't just a miracle. It was the start of a new life. They were no longer just people on the run. They were a chosen group, a different country, heirs to a promise that was being kept right in front of their eyes. Moses didn't want to be known. He just got down on his knees. The people all did the same thing. Now, the tears were not tears of fear, but tears of thanks. They were no longer in Egypt's dark night. The day of freedom had come. As a bond between heaven and earth, Moses' staff stays high. He doesn't talk. The wind does. The sound is no longer one of sadness, it's one of joy. A loud, angry roar from heaven cuts through the desert, as if God's breath were clearing away the chaos. The clouds move around like whirlwinds of holy smoke. They are heavy, full of judgment and purpose. Then, in front of thousands of shocked eyes, the sea starts to go away. At first, it felt like I was being pulled by something I couldn't see. Then it was like they were following an old order that everything had forgotten, but the voice of the Most High remembered. The waves break very hard, and what was once a wall opens up into a path. The Israelites' feet are shaking on the ground. The waves don't go away like the tide does. Instead, they rise like towers and walls, made by the way the world obeyed its creator. People just stand there and watch. There is no room to shout or have a party. The silence is now solemn. It's the kind of silence that comes before something holy. The scene is beautiful. Walls of water reach up to the sky on both sides. It looks like the liquid walls are crying because drops are falling from them. An old man with teary eyes points with a shaking finger and says, "Look, no one is brave enough to laugh. We are not putting on a show. It's hard to believe." Moses takes a step forward and looks straight ahead at the new road. There was no dust. There was no sand. For generations, people had been waiting for freedom. The ground was hard and dry, just right for their tired feet. He was the first person to follow. Not to run away, but to lead. People start to move behind him. The children who were crying before are now amazed as they look at the water walls. Some people put their arms out as far as they can to feel the waves. Mothers hold their children close to their hearts. They are still shocked, but their eyes have a new sparkle in them because they know that God does hear. Young people walk as if they can't believe they're on the bottom of the ocean. The older people walk slowly as they cry quietly. Each tear brings back memories of years of being mistreated that are now behind them. The people move forward as a single unit. No one looks back. No one is afraid. Faith pushes them through the impossible one step at a time. As Moses watches them, he feels both the weight of his duty and the comfort that comes from seeing the impossible become possible. Every step was more than just moving. That's what it said. Not only were they leaving Egypt, but they were also escaping their slave status. "We are free" was written on every step. It was a silent protest against the power that was trying to erase the character of a certain people with each step forward. At the same time, the sky held back its anger, as if it wanted to judge later. The storm looked like it went around the water, but it didn't touch the clear road. It seemed like time had stopped and was now stuck between what everyone thought would happen and what God had decided to do. Moses didn't put his staff down. His stance was firm, like a person who can talk to both heaven and earth. He knew it wasn't over yet. People had to cross the whole thing. There was no room for anything else to happen. The wind kept blowing, keeping the water walls up at the right level of strength, not more and not less. Back in the back, the last group of Israelites sped up. Women helped each other, kids carried their old parents around. The food and tools had to be carried by young people. At that crossroads, everyone worked together, by getting past, by being sure that something bigger was going on. And far away from where they came, the thunder was mixed with the sound of Egyptian horses. The dust on the horizon showed that Pharaoh's army was still after them, but no longer did people look on in fear. Fear turned into courage with each step into the water. Tough times turned into happy times. Sadness turned into hope. The hallway had an odd glow from the light reflecting off the water walls. There was a promise that was coming true, a way to get from being slave to the promised land. Everyone knew they would never be the same after crossing, even though they didn't know what was waiting for them on the other side. The sea, which was once seen as an enemy, was now held up as proof. Once a threat to destroy, the waves now stood watch over the people God had chosen for himself, like loyal guardians. The waves no longer cried out for justice. Instead, they whispered freedom. Moses finally gets on the other side of the river when the crossing is over. He looks at every face that walks by. While he feels the weight of duty, he also feels the peace of someone who trusts God to lead them. Every face tells a story. With each look, a memory of pain giving way to freedom. The last group goes across. With his stick still in his hands, Moses waits for the next order. He is aware that something still needs to happen, but for now, he thinks about it. He thinks about the miracle. He thinks about being reliable. As he thinks about this, the sea now bows to the Eternal One's order. The higher water created a holy path. The liquid walls looked like they were alive and breathing, like they were watching the Israelites' every move. The people moved forward, but the sound of the wind kept shaking them. It felt like the sky was blowing over them and pushing them to the other side. Before, the sand was buried under the water. Now, men, women, children, and the old walk on it barefoot. Not only did each person carry goods or things, but they also brought memories. Egypt's scars, memories of chains, and cries can still be heard. But now, the sea that had once threatened to swallow their hopes had opened up so that a new person could be born. They didn't run. They walked slowly and looked both ahead and to the sides in awe. The water towers rose up like mountains of liquid, and the way the light hit them made colors that no artist could have imagined. It felt like being inside a dream. The older people, with tears in their eyes, talked about the times they begged to be freed. Every move they made was a direct answer to prayers that were said in the dark while they were slaves. Even though the kids still didn't fully understand what was going on, they smiled and pointed at the sight of the still water. The mums walked with their kids close to them, feeling a mix of thanks and hope in their hearts. Even there, in the middle of the impossible becoming real, there were still voices shaking. A man whispered back, "Will everyone be able to cross before the sea goes back where it belongs?" People still had doubts, even when there was evidence from God. Moses, on the other hand, stayed in front. He kept walking. The look on his face was serious. He knew the God he worshipped. He was sure that the one who had made the way possible would not close it before everyone was saved. He wasn't sure that the water would stay still. He was sure that the one who controlled them would be true. It seemed like the Levites didn't want to disturb the serious mood of the crossing by singing softly. Each song made me feel better and gave me hope. It was impossible not to cry. More and more, it was clear that this wasn't just an escape. It was a new start. The end of the hallway could already be seen off in the distance. A flat area of land lit by a soft light that seemed to help tired feet find their way. It was like a promise that the other side really existed. It was no longer just a dream. It was the truth, but there were still a lot of bridges to go over. Again, the sound of horses and cartwheels could be heard as the last groups walked along the road that the miracle had made possible. Pharaoh's army was coming, ready to catch anyone who tried to flee. The dust mixed with the cloudy sky. They were so proud that they went into the split sea, as if they could share something that wasn't theirs. They didn't know that not everyone could go down this road. It was only for them. It was holy. They had ignored the cry for hundreds of years, but now they had the answer. Still, they went in. The chariots moved quickly, and the troops' cries of warning cut through the air. The Israelites did not run away, though. They didn't stop. They kept going, even more determined, because they knew this was the moment that would decide everything. The water passage was now a place where stress was rising. People moved forward on one side. On the other hand, the enemy attacked, not realizing that it wasn't fighting people but a heavenly order. Something changed in the air when the last Israelite set foot on dry land. The wind stopped. The clouds stopped moving around. There was quiet again, but this time it was the silence of waiting to judge. Moses looked out at the water. He still had the stick in his hand, but this time his arm was stronger than ever. He looked across the holy road and saw the enemy's camp. He didn't think twice about making that move. He understood what he needed to do. He took a deep breath and raised the staff again. That was enough. After following God's order to hold back for a moment, the waves got a new order. The walls started to shake. It was like they were waiting for the right time to do something. What was once a path turned into a grave in an instant. It took a lot of force for the liquid columns to break apart, and the sea went back to where it came from. The water's roar was so loud it was hard to hear. Egypt was hit by a divine force that was like thunder. The carts were taken in by the beast. The men were no longer seen. The sea that had opened the earth's belly to free it had now shut it to punish. On the other side, the Israelites did not say a word as they watched. There was not a party. It was a holy place. They knew that today was the end of an era and the start of a new one. The oppression was over. Slavery had gone down the drain. The ocean had talked. Its voice said, "These are mine." As the water towers stayed high on both sides, Moses stayed strong and moved forward with determination. His face showed that he was calm and sure that the one who had made the way possible would continue to support him until the end. The sounds of the wind whistling and the water moving around behind the dam served as a clear reminder of the wonder that was happening. People got the courage to keep going after seeing their boss move forward without stopping. It was hard to get through between the walls of the liquid, but it was safe. There were no loose rocks or mud that was easy to slip on. It looked like every mark on the dry ground proved that this wasn't a normal path. The road was made by hands that couldn't be seen for a certain group of people. Families walked next to each other. Some were moving quickly, while others were taking their time. But they were all feeling more and more sure that they were being led by something bigger than themselves. Kids were amazed as they pointed to the sky, where they could see fish swimming between the walls of clear water. They felt like they were in a temple made of the sea. While holding their babies close to their hearts, some mums said prayers in their heads. Some men carried bags, while others carried old people on their back. Even the most worn-out people found the strength to keep going. Even though it was still a long walk, the air felt different. They no longer felt bound by fear. Instead, they felt hopeful. When people started to sing praise songs, no one kept quiet. The simple tune, which was made up on the spot, turned into a choir. You could no longer whisper faith, you could sing it. But a quick look back brought back a bad thought. The Egyptian army had not given up. The chariots charged into the open path, depending on the same dry ground that the Israelites had used to stay alive. The wheels slashed sharply through the hard ground, and the sound of hooves and the armor making noise produced a sense of urgency. They were still in danger. People still didn't stop. On their faces, there was worry, but not hopelessness. There was resistance where there was doubt before. They knew someone else was with them. In a way that they could touch, they knew that God was with them. Even though they couldn't see him, the wind, the rising water, and the ground beneath their feet showed that he was working. "Keep going," Moses yelled, and his voice was clear even though the wind carried it away. "Don't look back. Freedom is coming." People were hit with these words like a bolt of courage. Some people sped up, while others held onto the hands of those who were moving more slowly. Families held their kids in their arms. Rows were moved around, and the sense of urgency turned into a call to action. People knew it was time for the miracle to happen. They had to get across before the sea went back to where it was. The Egyptians behind them looked sure of themselves. They moved forward haughtily, sure that they would eventually catch up to their former slaves. The main thing they didn't see, though, was that they weren't neutral. A holy place was hidden behind what looked like an easy path, a place that listened to the words of the Most High and not the power of the kings of the earth. Moses showed the way, but he didn't rush. He kept an eye on the people at all times, counting with his eyes how many were still missing, and watched over the last few groups like a father. No one was going to be left behind. He knew that God would always be there for him, so he had to be too. No matter how close the enemy got, the sound of praise never stopped. However, most of the eyes were no longer filled with fear. Some still turned back with some unease. Their steps were different in some way. They didn't have that courage. It came from people who had already done impossible things and knew the promise would come true. When the noise from the cars got louder in the middle of the hallway, the clouds started to move around. The sky turned into a swirl of light and dark. It wasn't like any other storm. It was a sign that the day of judgment was coming up. Even though the miracle was still going on, God's unseen clock was getting close to the end. Even though the water didn't move, you could tell it was waiting for a new order. Once the winds were always the same strength, but now they were changing, as if they were getting ready to blow hard again. Nothing seemed to be moving in the air. The first Israelites finally started to come out of the tunnel. They could feel the dry land of Canaan under their feet. They could see what the future held. It was no longer a far-off thought. It was solid, hopeful ground full of options. It was no longer possible to be a slave. Egypt was left behind and soon would be buried in time and the sea. Moses held out. He stayed near the entry until everyone had gone, even though he was ready to leave the water. He was more than just their leader. He was also their defender. He wouldn't stop until the last person was across safely. Now that there were enough people, they turned to look at the distance. The desert was still further ahead, but that trip through the water would always be remembered. That day, God made the impossible a way to freedom, not just a way to be saved. The open road between the water started to get smaller, not because it was farther away, but because time was slowly passing. On the other side, the first Israelites were already on the ground. As soon as their feet hit solid ground, they could not hold back tears of joy. They got down on their knees, gave their kids hugs, and looked up at the sky. The impossible was now possible. When it was almost finished, the cross became a permanent sign of God's faithfulness, but the sound of the threat kept going off behind them. It wasn't just the noise of horses and chariot wheels. It was also the pride of a kingdom that wouldn't give up. Still, the people were moving quickly, and they could feel the ground shaking from the enemy's heavy steps. While they were sure they would make it out alive, they were also nervous that they were not yet free. Still, Moses did not go back after crossing over. He had already done so. He stayed near the exit and watched every family, group, and kid that went by. He kept track of the people's steps and the seconds of the wonder without speaking. His eyes, on the other hand, were also on what was going on over there. There, Pharaoh's army moved into the place that God had made like hungry animals. Pharaoh stood at the front of his troops in his royal robe. His face was hard because he was angry and ashamed. He couldn't believe that people who had worked for him could get away from him. His pride was stronger than his sense. The road between the seas, which should have scared him, was just another challenge he was able to finish. So he gave the order for the attack. The Egyptian forces didn't think twice. They were sure of themselves as they fought with spears, swords, and shields, their armor shining in the dim light. The horses were told to run very fast. On the sea floor, God's people had carefully put their feet, but now men who trusted themselves more than God's kindness were stepping on it. The dust from the desert was still in the air, mixed with the water from the sea floor. The sound of chariots moving forward could be heard echoing off the water walls. The army yelled, hit shields with spears, and marched as if they were sure they would win. That being said, they didn't know they were in a place that wasn't theirs. The path was open to free people, not to get even. The watery towers stood straight up, were quiet and stayed still. But there was a change in the air. The wind was getting stronger all over the place after being steady. It looked like nature was holding its breath, ready for the last order. The sky started to get darker again from above. It looked like guards from heaven were ready to take action as the clouds swirled. Israel's people didn't turn away, even though they were safe. All of them faced the water. They couldn't look away from what they saw happening. The Egyptians' cries could be heard in the hallway, mixed with the noise of wheels and horses moving. Some Israelites were still afraid that the flood would happen before they got there. Others didn't change their minds because they thought God would not start something and not finish it. God then watched. He didn't do anything until all of the Israelites were gone. The enemy army had to be completely in the way before he moved. He waited until everyone who didn't care about the signs was on the trail. God's patience, which had been there all night, was now running out. Moses knew it. He did not hear a voice. He knew, though, now was the time. He raised his arms one last time to the sky while holding his stick. With that move, the crossing was over for good. The wind changed how it was blowing. The water walls shook. What was that strange sound coming from the sea? It looked like the ocean was begging God to tell it to go back to its bed. Then it took place. The water fell down like walls that had done their job. The force came quickly, was brutal, and wouldn't stop. The horses neighed in sadness. The men screamed, but no one could hear them. The waves were so strong that they broke apart the carts. There was no fight. There was no way out. This wasn't a fight. It was truth-telling. The miracle had been going on for hours, but now the sea buried the pride of a kingdom. And the Israelites were shocked to see that what Moses had said before was true. The Lord will fight for you. After that, there was a respectful silence, not one of fear. No one spoke. No one moved. The ocean had talked. Its voice was clear. These people were no longer slaves, they were free. The tunnel between the seas was cut through by Pharaoh's red chariot like a golden arrow through the darkness. He stood still with his eyes fixed ahead, as if he were already enjoying what he thought would be an easy win. For him, the fact that the sea was still open and the road was still dry showed that Egypt was always strong. He didn't notice that the sea's quiet was the same as the sound of a storm coming. The carts were moving quickly behind him. Men with guns yelled chants. Spears in hand, shields raised, alert and sure of themselves. Not a single one of them knew that this hallway wasn't theirs. Their eyes were closed to what the Israelites had seen. This road was not normal. It was holy. It was quiet at the other end, where the Hebrews were now on the safe side of the shore. No one was brave enough to party yet. They prayed with their hands together. They were sure, even though their eyes were teary and their hearts were beating fast. They were aware that unless God stepped in, they would not be able to fight Egypt. They did not have guns or horses, but they did have vows. Moses didn't move from the shore. He didn't feel his feet shake. He knew that God never misses the right time. The staff was still in his hand, and it looked like an extension of God's power. He stood there and watched as the Egyptian chariots violently cut through the water. During his wait, he looked around. The water walls that were once as still as formed glass were now moving. They were lit up by light waves, but only people who looked very closely could see that the air was slightly different. The wind got stronger. It looked like the day was going away as the sky, which had been cloudy, got darker. The signs got stronger. The judgment was coming soon. The king didn't see any of this. His heart was already hard, and pride sealed it even more. He couldn't believe that a man who spoke slowly and a group of freed slaves had both told him different things. As he marched, it looked like he was daring the gods. But he had no idea that he was walking right into the punishment for his pride. The carts that moved the fastest were almost in the middle of the hall. The stones in the dry stream got sparks from their wheels. Unhappy, the horses whinnied. Some of the Egyptian troops were getting nervous, but they had to keep going because the king told them to. There was no way to go back. They had no idea that each meter forward meant going further down into the darkness. People in Israel kept an eye on everything. They watched with wide eyes from the other side, their hearts torn between fear and joy. A pall of silence fell over the crowd. Even the boys who were interested and excited before were quiet. It felt like someone in heaven was taking a big breath because the air was charged with something that couldn't be seen. Then Moses got up and moved. His arms went up again. The staff pointed up into the sky, which broke the quiet. The wind changed and became very angry. The water was shaking. There was a low roar coming from the ocean's depths, like the depths were calling out for freedom. It was time. Moses' eyes were fixed. Not on Pharaoh, it's not on the troops, but up. He already knew without having to see. The order was given. The water wall started to move, first slowly, then stronger. At first it sounded like they were breathing, then like they were screaming. The Egyptians finally got it. Some people tried to keep their horses in line. Some people yelled in shock. It seemed like the wheels had lost their grip on the ground. It was too late, though. The sea rose to protect, but now it broke free to judge. The waves were so strong that they crashed down on both sides. It was like the ocean had been waiting for this moment to do something fair. Screams, horses, chariots, swords, and crowns were drowned out by the roar of the water. No sound was left. There was no more glory, just water. The children of Israel knelt on the other side. Some people cried. Some people were quiet. A lot of people put up their arms to give up, not to be afraid, but to the God who had not left them. For them, freedom meant more than just crossing the other side. It meant seeing for themselves that the enemy would never again hold them captive. The sea went back to where it was. Things got calmer on the surface. The wind stopped. There was only one thing that was certain in the air. God had fought for them. The Egyptian chariots kept moving forward with unbridled anger. The wheels turned very fast and cut into the still wet ground. The horses whinnied as they had to run toward the middle of the sea. It got harder to hear the soldiers as they yelled orders because of all the other noise. The seas, which were once controlled by mysterious forces, were shaking like a beast about to wake up. The flowing wall wasn't calm anymore. Swaying from side to side, it moved in short bursts of stress. The waves' deep sound got louder. It looked like the sea was holding its breath, ready to act at any time. That is, until the balance was broken out of the blue. The waves of water broke free with a roar that shook the sky. They fell on Pharaoh's army with terrible fury, like walls that suddenly fall down. It sounded like thunder bursting in the ocean, which was very loud. Without pity, the liquid avalanche fell and hit every carriage, horse, and fighter with all its might. What happened next was complete chaos. It looked like dry leaves were being thrown from side to side. The stream carried horses away, while they neighed in fear. Men who had been full of glory and pride moments before were now struggling as the huge waves swallowed them up. Before going under the water, spears and shields floated for a moment. The king was still standing straight in his fancy chariot, but his eyes told the story. He saw his greatness fade in front of him. He had been proud for a long time, but that was broken in an instant. Not much more could be done. There was no more power. It was decided by the God of Israel. When the waves hit each other, they made whirlpools that were very dangerous. What little Egyptian pride there was, washed away by the river. For hours, the sea had been behaving in an unnaturally controlled way. Now it roared with complete freedom. It's like they're saying, "You can't wait any longer." The Israelites, on the other hand, watched everything, not with angry eyes, but with tears of awe. A group of men, women, and children stood still with their backs to the sea. That sound, which was once a danger, was now proof. They were seeing an act of fairness, not evil. What they saw wasn't just the end of their enemies. It was proof that God was on their side. It only took a few minutes for the sounds of swords striking, troops yelling, and wheels breaking down to stop. The sound of the waves returning to their normal beat was all that was left. The water went back to its original level, as if nothing had happened, but past was no longer the same. The world's most feared army was wiped out without an Israeli sword being raised. There was no fight. The Eternal One's hand was the only thing that stood between time and space to protect those who carried his word. There is no war plan, no human tricks, only faith, loyalty, and actions that seem miraculous. The people were quiet for a long time. They could still feel the ground moving under their feet. The air smelled like the sea. From the bottom of their hearts, every man and woman there knew it wasn't just a flight. It was a new start. Their past lives as slaves were buried with the Egyptian chariots. From that came a new country, a people who were not marked by being slaves, but by God's help. It wasn't just a matter of geography. In a mental way, it was about them. It made history. Moses finally let go of his arms, but he kept his stick in his hands. The sea was quiet, as if it had taken a break in his mind's eye. He didn't say anything, but the way he stood said it all. The Lord has helped us so far. There were softer hugs between mothers and children. Men just stood there and looked at each other. Some got down on their knees. Some people just stared at the sky. They would never be the same again, that much was certain. The ocean had talked. Its roar could still be heard in their hearts. The sea was once more quiet. There was no longer any wind. Now that the water was calm, it rippled as if it had never been split. On the surface, there was no sign of the chariots, the cries, or the Egyptian anger. But below, in the quiet deep, the empire's weapons that dared to stand up to the God of Israel were hidden. The sound of wheels and horses was no longer mixed with the dust from the desert that was carried by the wind. It was like time itself had been made clean by God's justice. The Israelites were safe now, and they stood on the other side. They looked out at the sea with still hearts. They saw not only the end of a torment, but also the grave of a whole past. Moses stood there straight up with his staff dropped. He didn't need to say anything. People knew what to do. There was no more wonder. The sea had opened to protect them and then shut again to punish them. The slaves and the Egyptian chariots had both drowned. Abuse would no longer follow them. It really was the end of an era. A new group of people was starting to form there by the water. Not only were they free, but they had also seen with their own eyes how powerful their God really was. There was no question left. The Lord wasn't just an idea they got from their parents. He was now real, there and alive among them. Families hugged each other. The kids were free and didn't have to worry about anything. The old people cried quietly and put their hands on the ground as if they wanted to feel the promise being kept. They were no longer the same, but the ground beneath them was still the same. The sea, which had seen them saved, had also become a symbol of justice. At that point, Israel didn't need to build altars because the water had already become a tribute. They still remember the day that God reached out and saved them, ending the circle of pain. Egypt shrunk when it crossed the sea, not because they are far away, but because they have a new point of view. It wasn't the center of life anymore. It was no longer the most powerful force. The king, who was very proud, was now the only sound in the deep. Egypt, with its soldiers, chariots, and gods, was now a thing of the past. Moses put his hands up to the sky while still looking at the water, not to ask but to say thank you. There were no words that could express how grateful they were for what they did, and when people saw him, they got it. They all stood up one by one. They started singing. It wasn't a lesson song. It wasn't a proper song. It was praise that came from the hearts of people who had been saved. A tune that talked about going over, makes, and freedom. A song that used more than just the voice. It used the hands, feet, and eyes that were filled with tears. It was the right thing to do when you believe in a God who carried them across the water. The sounds mixed and echoed through the desert. The words, "Praise the Lord, who fights for his people and beats strong people with a single breath." People of all ages danced. The kids clapped their hands. The ground's dust rose like smoke that you couldn't see. Today was the start of a new era. Crossing wasn't just the end of Egypt. It was also the start of who they were. They were no longer just runaway. They were a country, separate people who are guided by unseen hands and kept alive by promises that will never end. Not being slaves changed their names. They were free. It was God who owned them, and people would always remember that day. Generation after generation would hear it over and over again, in tents, by campfires, at feasts, during fasts, in poems, on papers, in the eyes of prophets, and in the songs of the saved. It would be a monument that lasts forever, the day the water split, the day that God fought for them. As Moses watched the people celebrate, he knew that tough times were coming. It would be dry, hard, full of doubt, and you would fall. But right then and there, the people saw God. That was enough to keep going. Once the waves stopped, it was a lesson that if God is there is always a way out of tough situations. And if that's not enough, the ocean will split. Moses stays where he is and looks out over the distance. The wind moves slowly across his face, which is now free of the dust of being persecuted. The waves of the ocean are still behind him. No longer is there the roar that drove the enemy away. Instead, there is the confidence that God is with them. He takes a deep breath, as if he's thinking about more than just a win. He's thinking about a new age. The people move as one in front of his eyes. A lot of them are still crying. Some of them are on their knees with their backs to the ground. Some people pray, sing, or just hug their friends in silence. Different people react in different ways to the miracle they just saw. They are no longer slaves. They are no longer on the run. It's free. Moses looks at their faces. He sees men who used to question, women who cried in Egypt, and kids who had never known anything but slavery. Now, each and every one of them is standing in front of a fresh start. A long ago promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is starting to come true right in front of their eyes. People start to sing. They give off a music that comes from the soul, not the instruments. You can't learn this kind of song. You have to live it. Voices rise like soft waves and join together to make one sound. The Lord is my strength and my song. His coming has saved me. When sung with joy, those words are more than just lyrics. They are witnesses, living statements of a people who have been saved from harm by God's powerful hand. Women play tambourines and dance, kids clap their hands, and older people say prayers. In the middle of the crowd, Moses knows that this applause is the real proof that they have changed. Moods take over the camp. It seems like each tear holds the weight of many generations, which has now been washed away by God's kindness. Jerusalem is now free, not just from Egypt, but also from shame, fear, and the past. Sea wasn't just a way to get somewhere, it was a grave for what was left behind. There was no more defeat. The most powerful army in the world disappeared in front of a people who were not armed but strong in their faith. A cloud was too strong for Pharaoh to handle. The chariots of war were stopped by God's breath, and the difficult road in the middle of the sea turned into a way to God for all time. In his thoughts, Moses realizes that the wonder wasn't just the crossing. The real wonder is what's going on right now. People are worshiping. A group of people who know that their very survival rests on God's faithfulness. That changes everything. He knows, though, that the trip is only just starting. It's still a long way to the dreamland. They are about to face the vast, unknown desert, which will be hard, silent, and full of difficulties. People will go hungry. People will be thirsty. There will be hard times that show what's in their hearts. They now know who is in charge, though. They won't be left alone by the God who set them free. For a moment, Moses closes his eyes and thinks back to the burning bush, the staff, the fights with Pharaoh, the nights of prayer, the questions and the fear. Now, everything seems so far away. Every step was important. Every trouble set the stage for this very moment. He opens his eyes again and sees a group of people who are ready to help. The faces aren't the same anymore. There's a difference. In their eyes, there is a reason. Have faith in what they do, hope in their steps. The sea behind them marks the line between today and tomorrow. Now that Israel is free, it has the potential to become a country that shines a light on other countries. There is now a sign of freedom inside every group, family and child who was born under the rule of Egypt. They will inherit a surprise. They are the chosen ones. As they take their first steps into the unknown, Moses knows that the story is just getting started. They're not walking by themselves. The cloud column is still there. They are still being watched over by God. In the heat of the desert, the darkness of the night, and the worries about tomorrow, the same God will walk with them. When they feel like giving up, they can remember that the sea parted, which is enough. Don't miss this story if it spoke to you or touched your heart. Send this video to someone who needs to remember that God still finds ways out of tough situations. Please click like and subscribe if you haven't already. Then stay with us as we go on this path. The God who split the sea should be with you in all your lands. Thank you for following us to the end of this incredible story. See you in the next video. May God be with you always. Amen.